Today I ducked up by telling my son's new doctor we are anti-vax. Obligatory. This happened several months ago. TLDR at bottom. My son has autism, level 1, previously called Asperger's, and you too, that he also has a psychiatrist, multiple psychologists and doctors. We decided to get a new primary doctor who works closely with his other providers to better coordinate his care this past summer. I brought my son in for a standard well child visit and spent nearly an hour with this new doctor going over his issues and medications, history, etc. Toward the end of the visit she says to me, well, he can get the Gardasil vaccine today, to which I reply, oh, no he can't have that. I don't want him to get autism. I should maybe note here that I'm an Aspie too, and while I think my sarcasm is on point, I must have been a little too serious looking because she just stared at me. The silence lasted an eternity while I imagined she was deciding how to proceed. Eventually I laughed and tried to assure her I was only kidding, but she only returned a nervous sounding chuckle and left the room. As my son and I were discussing whether I was offensive, he thought I was hilarious. In walked the nurse with a stack of information about vaccines. He started his lecture about vaccine safety and potential risks, etc., and no amount of my assurances that we are not in fact anti-vax would stop him. He just kept saying, okay, well I have to tell you this, in a way that suggested that the doctor told him to give me the full spiel. TLDR, jokingly told my son's new doctor that I didn't want him to get more autism, got a 15-minute lecture on vaccine safety for my already fully vaccinated kid. Edit. Of course we took the Gardasil. Shout out to Nurse Pete for being the first nurse to ever give my kid a vaccine without him crying or fist fighting everyone. I wish everyone could have a Nurse Pete. Also, since I'm editing, thanks for the awards. 1. That was hilarious. It wasn't you. I've had a doctor explain to me point blank that they effectively aren't allowed to interpret something as a joke. They must check the comment wasn't made because a patient doesn't understand. So it's like making a bomb joke to airport security. Fellow people get it, but they are working in an environment where it is considered risky to dismiss as a joke what might be a nervous reveal, so they are trained to respond differently. Just thought you might like to know others have the same experience with jokes and doctors too. Keep rocking on your awesome humor. That's why you never make a domestic violence joke when your girlfriend goes to the hospital. Shit gets real quick. I once went to hospital, and when taking my shirt off for the stethoscope, nurse noticed my arm had a blue tint. Dye had rubbed off a new non-fast color shirt. Nurse wanted to know why my arm was blue. I didn't know and didn't care because I knew there was nothing was wrong with the arm. Being unable to explain why my arm was blue was the wrong answer. Suddenly she was noticeably adversarial, as if I was hiding something, and things became more like an interrogation. I realized what was starting to happen and figured I needed to solve the mystery of the blue arm and do it quickly. Fortunately I did. My friend took his girlfriend into the ER one night because she had a killer ear infection. I guess she woke up to it hurting so bad that she called him and asked him to take her. He must have been giving off vibes or something, I don't know, because the nurses and doctors kept asking them questions about him, and when his girlfriend was alone they started asking her if he abused her. When they told me the story they were both weirded out by it, and 10 years later I'm still wondering what he did / said to make them so concerned. Went to the hospital with a full-blown panic attack at the dramatic age of 17. I was driven by a friend who was scared out of her mind. My father drove like a bat out of hell to get there, as daddies do. When they get the call that their teenage kid is headed to the ER, they wouldn't let him in the treatment room and called social workers to meet with me to evaluate my home life. That was the day my mom, who got there after my daddy called her crying because they wouldn't let him in and he didn't know what was going on, discovered my underage gotten tattoo. A hush fell over the room at that point. She just sighed in that moment, and in that room, she couldn't yell at me. Haha. This reminded me of the time I showed my mum my new tongue piercing in front of all of her work colleagues. She also couldn't yell at me. It was a good day lol. Oh man. When my grandma saw my eyebrow piercing for the first time, she whacked me in the back of my head and called me a stupid girl in front of a room full of people. Grandma gives zero fucks. When it got torn out, it left a small scar, and she still tells me I ruined my pretty face 15 years later. Wait, if you give someone with autism vaccines, shouldn't that just cancel out the autism? Like bonking someone the head both causes and cures amnesia. Nah, it definitely multiplies the autism. Proof, the story you just read was written by a fully vaccinated adult. Wouldn't want to get super autism. Weaponized autism. How do you get through TSA with weaponized autism like that? You don't. At that level you just flap your arms to fly places. I don't laugh at most autism jokes, but this one got me. The beauty of sarcasm. When it works great, but when it doesn't, boy does it fall flat. Great TIFU by the way. I'm glad you enjoyed it. I thought joking about vaccines causing autism was like something only Asper's could do. Apparently that only applies to the ones I live with. I think it's hard for doctors to joke about it, because I guess it's a sensitive topic, because of how awful actual anti-vaxxers actually are. Yeah, I think this is along the lines of don't joke about packing a suitcase bomb in front of TSA employees. It might be a funny joke, but it's their job to take it very seriously. Yeah, exactly this. Out of context this is funny, but when you actually have to deal with people who seriously believe that crock of shit on a pretty regular basis, it kind of kills any potential humor there. A sore subject, basically. Also, sarcasm helps when you actually know the person. A doctor likely isn't familiar enough with all of their patients to know their humor, such as I'm guessing is the case with OP. That's why sarcasm is so hard online in particular. Not only is there no tone, but you have no basis for character on anyone. Someone trying to be sarcastic about how the earth is really flat? No one knows if you're actually stupid or being sarcastic. That's why /s is absolutely needed, no matter how obvious you think you are. If I tell my wife I'm going to beat her because she overcooked my pasta, then it's how we both joke to each other with exaggerations. She says she'll cut me for stealing a French fry. If I tell strangers that I almost had to beat my wife because she messed up my meal, well, you can see how that sounds. Op was part of the doctor not knowing her well enough to actually know if it was a joke or not. This isn't your average everyday autism. This is advanced autism. I'm special, no doubt. On the spectrum as well. Asperger's. Whenever I get a flu shot I tell my girlfriend I'm leveling up. Now that is next level humor. You made me snort in the cafeteria. Why are you doing cocaine? Medical setting seems to be the very worst for jokes falling flat. When my wife was pregnant we went for a checkup. I should point out this was relatively late, like 6 months or something. Wife was very obviously pregnant. Doctor, are you the father? Me, yes, but we aren't sure if she's the mother. Now, I thought this was at least a little bit funny. Doctor did not. She just looked at me deadpan for about 5 seconds then turns to my wife and is just like right, shall we continue? Edit. Obligatory thanks for the gold edit. Knowing that someone paid actual real money in response to this joke makes me wonder how much my humorless doctor might have paid me to not make it. Chances are the doctor was giving you the I've been doing this for 20 years. Do you really think you're the first one I've heard make that joke stare? That's like customer service and hearing for the 100th time that day. Anything else? Yeah, how about $1 million? Had her if it doesn't scan it's free, right? I have worked customer service for some years and I'll take an oversus joke from a customer with a smile 1,000 times over the kind of shit attitude they usually have. Amen. You could confuse your next doctor even more by being overly keen on vaccines. Say it's so he can reach the next level of autism. Make the doctor think you believe that being autistic is like being a Saiyan, unlocking better abilities with each level. Yeah, I figure a couple more vaccines and his card counting will be on point enough to take him to Vegas. Sid is a person who's always wondered if he has a little undiagnosed Asperger's due to a tendency to make inappropriate jokes. If you're going to card count, do it in New Jersey. They legally can't throw you out for it. I was all ready to state that your FU was in being anti-vax. Instead you made me smile. Making terrible jokes is fun, especially with doctors. My daughter is type 1 diabetic. Asking the new doctors with a straight face why they won't tell us which essential oil we can give her instead of insulin is fun. I can almost see the pain in your doctor's eyes. That's hilarious. How do the doctors react when you finally crack a smile? Apprehensively relieved that they aren't going to lose their license for socking a fool. It's all in the delivery. They laugh after a minute. How many times did it take to nail that delivery, haha? I said a lot of stupid things as a kid. You learn it organically. Sarcasm is like a vaccine. Not everyone gets it. Reminds me of this meme. When you're already autistic and still get vaccinated. Level up. You had me ready to get my anti-vax rant until I go towards the end and couldn't stop laughing. I follow a few anti-pseudoscience and pro-science groups on Facebook. The pro-science one will love this story. If you don't mind me sharing it, feel free. Cheers. Thanks for watching to the end. Remember to give a thumbs up if you enjoyed this video and punch the subscribe button in the face.